Catus Maximus here. This time a little video about the Milwaukee Spline drive nut drivers. They have a couple different series, it appears, of nut drivers. They have these both in metric and standard. A bit expensive. They're talking 40, 50 bucks online for a 7-piece set. It does supposedly have a magnet symbol there, but yeah, it's just magnetized steel, and this one has lost its magnetism. Generally, I'm not super impressed by these, and I would recommend a variety of other brands of nut drivers, whether they're Kleins or German Whiz, whatever it is. I would not recommend Spline drive nut drivers. Harbor Freight has these T-handle Quins, which are also Spline drive. And about, I guess a lot of situations it's fine, but there's also many situations where there are frustration, and in a nut driver it's just really pretty pointless. You're not going to be working with 12-point fasteners because those are generally aircraft and diesel engines, and you just use a 1/4-inch spinner handle in a 12-point socket. These are for service technicians, carpenters, that type of stuff, people who generally just would have a use for a nut driver. And you're going to be much better off with just a normal 6-point that's going to grip the fasteners properly. The fact that this can drive spline or square or 12-point is actually almost entirely irrelevant. And it's going to actually lead to a little bit of frustration. Oh, I forgot to mention, like this Vaco, it would have been much better if the Milwaukee had just an inset permanent magnet. They have this claim here where they have a long through shaft, which is just fine. But if you actually have a nut so far down that it's just inches and inches down a piece of shafting, it's not like you're going to use a nut driver to remove it. And I can tell you, Tiny's not even very impressed. There we go. Not only will she not even get out of bed for this nut driver, she won't even flinch. She won't even move. She is totally uninterested. And that's generally how I feel about the situation. If you're working with a really nice high-grade fastener like this, these will work just fine and actually give you plenty of grip. There is quite a bit of motion here, quite a bit of play. This happens to be an old, I think this is a Vaco. So this little American-made Vaco here. And this, if we look, definitely a lot less play, as you might expect. Where it really starts to become an issue between traditional 6-points and like this Spline drive is this is actually a pretty still a high quality sheet metal screw. Many sheet metal screws have really inconsistent heads. That rounding on the corners of this head is just from manufacturing. So you'll have this situation where you're trying to use a screwdriver and it's going to be slipping unless you have it all the way down. And on fasteners that are slightly corroded or ones that don't have quite as tall of a head or really, really cheap, you're going to have to make sure that this driver is seated all the way and square. Otherwise, you're going to have issues with it slipping and, of course, potentially stripping out the fastener. And it just makes it a little bit more frustrating and inconvenient to use rather than just a 6-point, which is going to have a really nice solid grip. If you're working on these and you're trying to break rusty ones or even torque down ones that have a lot of force or need a lot of force, that's really where the 6-point's going to come into play. So I find, or my impression of these, is that they're the kind of tool that you initially think is pretty nice, but once you start using them and in practice, you'll end up finding that they're just not as satisfying as a traditional 6-point nut driver. And I think this tool is a bit ill-conceived. Anyway, thanks for watching.